Thank you all for welcoming me here. I'll get started because it's quite an extensive topic. So, climate change and health. So, I want to start with a very strong statement announced on 7th September this year, where 220 medical journal editors together declared that the greatest threat to global public health is the continued failure of world leaders to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees centigrade and to restore nature. This shows and follows up on long-stated statements that climate change is being seen as the greatest public health threat for the 21st century. I think it's not working. Okay. How does climate change impact health? So I'm going to go through this briefly. The answer is it's complicated, but it is measurable and the effect is significant. We're seeing about at least 150,000 deaths annually due to climate change, and this could reach at least 250,000 deaths annually by the year 2040. There's a statement there behind the gentleman over here, which is, we know this. We don't need more research to maybe get new figures. We know that climate change is affecting health. So, there are various categories of climate change risks to health, and I will go through them one by one. So, direct effects. A direct effect is it is hot and it is affecting my body directly. So, those would be, for example, heat waves, extreme weather events, and air pollution. The next would be indirect effects. These are changes in the biophysical system and the ecosystem. So, for example, we mentioned food security. So, climate change affects food production, affecting our health. That is another way of looking at it. And lastly, there are what we call diffuse effects. If you could go back, please. Diffuse effects. They are changes that are happening in society. For example, you could have migration due to climate change. You could have conflict due to climate change and mental health effects, which are very often overlooked in this sector. So, direct effects. We're going to go through them one by one briefly. So we've got rising temperatures, temperature-enhanced air pollution, extreme weather events, and a prolonged allergen season. So, air pollution. We all know about the ozone and the ozone layer. However, that is what we call troposphere. Tropospheric ozone. The ozone that we breathe here on a ground level is very rarely produced by our economic activity. However, as temperatures increase, pollutants in our atmosphere are interacting so as to affect our lungs and affect our respiratory system. This is causing lots of problems in respiratory conditions, especially in highly polluted environments, and is expected to increase as temperatures increase. We also have rising temperatures. We've always experienced them this year. We have discomfort, heat stress, heat stroke, we have dehydration, and we have an increase in cardiovascular disease risk. The charts to the left are what we call temperature-related mortality graphs. So over there you've got temperature in various cities around the world, and you've got relative risk of dying when a certain temperature threshold is reached. And you can see over there in London, Stockholm, Rome, and Madrid. And as you can see, when you go beyond a certain threshold, suddenly death rates rise significantly. This is just looking at mortality, not people entering hospital. We also see that Malta's climate got 1.4 degrees centigrade hotter over the last century, and they're getting hotter every year. What are we experiencing today? These are just 3 snippets that you can see from the news. Cancer patients spent the night in hotel to escape a power cut. This is a public health crisis. When the power goes, because of increasing air conditioning demands, this is affecting people's health significantly. We're being warned to stay inside as temperatures soar to 43 degrees centigrade. We've had 3 heat waves this summer. 3 heat waves, one in June, starting June. This is affecting our health. On the right is an image from India, asphalt melting. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this as the years go by. What are we foreseeing for the future? This is from the IPCC document. And over there, we're seeing that as temperatures increase, hot temperature extremes over land are set to increase as well. A 50-year event is set to increase by, where we're heading to, 3 degrees centigrade at this current point. They're set to increase between 14 times and 40 times in frequency. That makes 1 every 2 years. This is very worrying from a public health perspective. Yes, next one. I think it's conflicting just a bit. Okay, there we go. So extreme weather events. So as we get storms, as we get very rough conditions happening that perhaps were not so common before, we get disruption of community life, an increased risk to health, and damage to health infrastructure. Sea level rise. On a direct level, we're talking about the risk of increasing effects of storm surges. As sea levels increase incrementally, when a storm surge comes, the water can infiltrate farther in, and that has a significant effect on health because it damages property and can be a threat to our lives. One quick thing to look at, our coast. San Blas and Gozo before and after. Is this the future of our coastal assets? How will this affect our mental health as we see our coastlines decline? Allergens. So, because of increasing temperature, we're getting a prolonged allergen season. We're getting longer and earlier growing seasons, and therefore more pollen means more allergens. Interestingly, evidence is showing, behind the gentleman over here again, that as CO2 levels increase, so not temperature, but just as CO2 levels increase, so does pollen. Okay, so we're getting greater allergen effects being observed in our general population. Okay, we now move to indirect effects, which I'll go to briefly because they've been alluded to already. So we have, apologies, go back. Sorry. Food security. Okay, so again, that headline over there. Minister reveals Malta was facing a major food crisis last year. It made my blood run cold. Well, we really need to start worrying about this problem. We cannot keep relying on imported food. The absolute bulldozing of our agricultural sector. They destroyed my fields, my trees, and I still have no compensation. We're seeing this every single day. Our agricultural community is being decimated. Water security. The map over there to the left shows over 8,000 boreholes that we know of in Malta. Only 3,500 are being metered. This is not only an abuse of our most precious asset, but as a great neglect that we're observing. And as years go by, over there from the IPCC report, the Mediterranean region highlighted over there is set to get a greater risk of drought as years go by. Malta is facing significant desertification. In fact, again, we're going to look at an increase of drought, extreme drought, happening 2.5 times to 4 times more frequently as the years go by. That is where we're heading, more than 3 degrees, unless we start cutting carbon emissions drastically. Here we have a golden opportunity that we once had, which was the water relief project. Unfortunately, we dump most of the water into the sea. This should not be the case. We should be making great use of this precious resource that we have. Vector-borne diseases. What are vectors? Vectors would be mosquitoes, ticks, etc. As time goes by, we get a spread of these vectors across climates that perhaps before were not amenable for them. And we get an increased risk of spread of malaria, dengue, West Nile virus fever, chikungunya. These are tropical diseases which we do not know of over here or we once knew of years ago, but they could risk a comeback. We also get a risk of Lyme disease spreading, a Mediterranean spotted fever. In fact, going back to the Asian tiger mosquito over there, it was first reported in Malta in 2010. They are now quite commonplace. I'm sure we've all been bitten by them in recent years. Diffuse effects, mental health, migration, and conflict. Okay, go back here. So many young people today, not just young people, are facing increasing anxiety due to ecological breakdown, loss of culture and community, and hopelessness in the future. In fact, I would like here to quote Greta Thunberg herself. Why should I be studying for a future that soon may be no more when no one is doing anything to save that future? And what is the point of learning facts when the most important facts clearly mean nothing to our society? This is the reality we face today. Young people are facing increasing hopelessness in the future. Migration. By 2050, if no action is taken, we're facing around 150 million internal climate migrants across 3 regions. I want you to focus on sub-Saharan Africa over there. This is already happening today. Climate change is a major reason why many people are migrating across continents. So this is triggering huge changes in societies around the world. Conflict. As temperatures increase, we get an increasing fight over scarce resources, and that leads to conflict. Interestingly, research is showing that as temperatures increase, so does human aggression. So when it's hot and you feel like snapping at someone, that is actually a human response to temperature. So, solutions. The solutions are not simple. To sum it up, I'd like to do this. Dismantle neoliberal free market capitalism. Let's face it, the system has failed. We cannot fix the current system. Markets on their own cannot control themselves. We need to stop kidding ourselves. We are running out of time. This is no longer something to kick down the road again. We need to focus on measures of well-being and not GDP. As my colleague over here really talked about during her speech, we should be measuring well-being and health of citizens, not collective wealth, which, as we see, is increasingly concentrated in the hands of the very few. We need to stop procrastinating. Please, let us take the plunge and go for a new way of measuring our economic output. We need to tackle the urban heat island effect. These are very Malta-focused over here. We have an extensive problem in Malta. Extensive greening of our urban areas, which are concrete heat traps. I write your policies have failed because it is the policymakers who, year after year, keep talking about changing the situation, but it just worsens and worsens. We have a concrete jungle. Malta is turning into a favela as we look around, basically. It is becoming unlivable. This has real-world health implications that go far beyond mere aesthetics. Build buildings which are suited for human habitation. These are some examples from Malta, over here. Policy failures for all to see. Okay, thank you. Unpleasant environments make for mental health problems. Not only that, we are creating obesogenic environments. What are obesogenic environments? Environments that promote obesity. You hear people, I don't want to go walking in the road, it's full of cars, full of traffic, the pavements are broken, and the buildings are ugly. This is the reality we're seeing in Malta today, and that is having a significant public health burden. No to intensification of activity. We cannot keep on talking about climate change and then, hey, we want to build a helipad in Gozo, an airport in Gozo, we'd like to build a tunnel for cars, we'd like to build a yacht marina in Marsa Scala because it generates economic activity. We're either going to tackle climate change or we can just stop kidding ourselves. Okay? We need to choose the economic models we want. No to further intensification that destroys our well-being and our way of life. Enough with it makes more money. Money is optional. Our well-being and health is not. Habitable spaces. We have so many ideas. We're given some excellent ideas from the ambassador to the Netherlands over here. Green architecture, well-insulated buildings, bikeways, well-aerated buildings. Design, please. Don't cram. Malta is one giant Tetris block. We can't keep having this. We just can't. Cities and roads are for people, not cars. Okay? Spoiler alert. They are for people, not cars. Apologies, let's go back. Re-green and re-wild. Okay? We keep talking about it, but efforts so far have been quite meager. We need to improve our biodiversity and sustainability through these efforts. And if done well with suitable species, it might arrest desertification while also making our environment much better. This needs to be done carefully. You don't just throw trees here and there and just abandon them, which we've seen often. Public health, be prepared. We need to prepare infrastructure for increasing extreme weather events. We need to I believe strongly that there needs to be consultation with public health experts in any policy and stop compartmentalizing. I once went to the health minister to talk about air pollution. He said, that's environment. I went to the environment minister, he said, that's health. Are we going to keep doing this? A health in all policy approach. Why don't we have health consultants on planning boards? Why don't we have health consultants in other areas? Transdisciplinarity is key if we are to tackle climate change effectively. Food security. We need innovation in a dying sector. We need to encourage local food production and stop supermarketization, as I call it. We need to encourage not only local food production, but places where it can be sold, you know? We can't keep on... I went to Lidl last time, they were selling onions from New Zealand. Come on. Onions from New Zealand, when we produce them here. We need to treat water as a major security issue. And yes, farmers need our help. Here are some ideas. I don't have time to go into them, but we have hydroponics as a viable alternative, which, in fact, Malcolm already uses. And then we have agroforestry, for example. We would discuss this as a possible planning alternative. We need to even talk about things like desert agroforestry, because that is the climate we'll be facing, increased aridification. Water security. We need to take water seriously. Again, this has been spoken about. However, we need to use new water more frequently. We need to distribute it more to farmers. And this needs to be seen as on a national policy level. Malta is one of the world's most water-stressed countries with a 92% rating. Kuwait has a 90% rating. We're worse than Kuwait. Mental health. Take our concerns seriously. This is not a joke or the latest trend. You know, hopelessness is contagious and it's spreading in society. And I'll give you, we mentioned the World Youth Climate Conference, but I want to quote Greta Thunberg, what she said yesterday. Blah, 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 green economy. Blah, 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 net zero emissions by 2050. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? Are we going to keep on blah, blah, blahing away through these crises, or are we going to effectively start tackling them? The research is there, the output is there, the reports are there. Let's get started. It's time to treat this as a national and existential crisis. Please, no more greenwashing. Difficult decisions need to be taken, and that is the role of policymakers. The onus is on politicians to lead. We know the science. This is time for action, not kicking balls down the road. Thank you very much.